Yeah.
Hi. Okay, so hello everyone. We are going to look at foundations in RCC today. Yeah. What we are going to do through the presentation, and we are also going to do one small kind of an example of how foundations can be, how parts of foundations can be calculated actually. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, one of the most key and important factors that we have that you should be considering when you're thinking of foundations is how much load is actually to be transferred on the foundation. Okay, for example, that contain in case of an RCC frame structure. You have to keep in mind the presentation that Shantanu had made vis-a-vis the frame structure SketchUp model as well, because this will also help you to connect back to some of the things that he was showing over there. Let's start. Okay, so this is a typical kind of a frame structure condition. Uh, there are loads that are coming all the way from the roof, that are transferred down to the roof slab. Okay, in our case, those loads are live loads. Okay, we don't have the situation where we have snow and things like that, so we don't have static loads like snow. But yes, wind is a very big factor also in thinking about those loads. Yeah. Uh, from the slab, the loads which are accepted are then transferred to the beams below, as you can see. From there, the loads also of the infill panels that you have. So whether it's brick or it's your wood frame, your window, all those loads then get transferred down to the beams or at the base. Yeah. All this load gets consolidated in the column and it moves down through the columns. Okay, there are live loads on the floor that need to be transferred to the secondary beams. From the secondary beams, the loads will move to the primary beams. Okay, and from the primary beams, again, the loads will move down to the column, which then is taken down all the way down to your foundations. Yeah. This is just showing the edge beams, which will also be bringing the load back onto the column, and all that total load is then transferred down to foundation, where that load has to be transferred to what is called the subsoil. Okay, so these are the ways in which loads will move into your column footings. Okay. Okay, let us understand what is actually happening when it comes to the loads moving to your footings. Okay, just hold on a second. Yeah. Generally, when the loads move down to your footing, okay, the loads get transmitted through the concrete foundation at an angle of 45 degrees. Okay, that is the angle of shear at which the load will eventually get transferred. Okay, the subsoil beneath the foundation is compressed and reacts by exerting an upward pressure to resist the foundation loading. Okay, if you imagine that you are standing on quicksand for some time. Okay, you will soon find that you are starting to sink in the quicksand. Okay, but if you have padded shoes, right, you will not sink. Okay, that is almost exactly what is happening with the building and its foundation also. Okay, the soil, although although for us it is able to take our weight and things like that, the soil actually is a very uh, dynamic sort of condition. I'm sure that Neeraj and Rajita have discussed soil and its properties as well. Okay, if the foundation load exceeds the maximum passive pressure of ground, that is the bearing capacity of ground, okay, then there will be a downward movement. Okay, and the remedy is to increase the size of the plan of the foundation to reduce the load per unit area, or alternatively reduce the loading being carried by the foundation. So you have two options. Either you increase the surface area of the foundation that touches the ground, or you reduce the load of your own building. Okay, these are the two ways that you can actually stop the building from sinking. At any point of time, if you have any questions, Mamta, please go ahead and ask, and they can also ask.
I'm sorry, can you repeat this statement just once?
Okay, I'll read it. It's here, I'll read it. Subsoil beneath the foundation is compressed and reacts by exerting an upward pressure to resist the foundation loads. Okay, if foundation loads exceed the maximum passive pressure of ground, that is the bearing capacity. I'll explain you what bearing capacity is in detail also. Okay, there will be obviously a downward movement of the foundation. Correct? If I am going to take an iron rod, okay, and I'm going to put it inside sand, it's going to probably stay there. But if I increase the load on the iron rod, it's going to enter inside. Correct? Okay, if you want to stop that settling or that movement downwards from happening, you have two choices. One is to expand the area of contact of your foundation. Second is to reduce the load that is coming in from the building. Is that okay?
Yeah. So I think this comment that Deep has put up is absolutely right. So
Okay.
if you look at, have you seen, since he's used the word buoyancy, do you know about these buoys that you see in the sea
The boys, yeah.
that are tied to the anchors of the ship, right? So to locate the position of the anchors, you have these objects that are floating in water, so you can identify where it is. So how much ever you try to push this into the water, right? These light objects, you try to push them, they bounce back, correct? Because it's that upthrust of that water which is pushing back the lightweight objects. That weight or density of the water is more than that of the object, and so it pushes it back. And this is exactly what we're looking at the soil to do for us, and depending on the soil
Yeah.
bearing capacity which we studied in the first year. So depending on the type of soil, what is the bearing capacity of the soil, the foundation is so designed so that the soil is able to give that upthrust and keep it in place. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So then, then as sort of people who are interested in building foundations, or as architects, there are three fundamental things that we need to take into consideration. Okay. One is what is called A, which is the depth at which we place the foundation. Okay. Very important, because that actually will decide for us what is the bearing capacity of soil at that point. Yeah. The second is we need to also keep into consideration the width or the area of foundation, and this is what we are going to try and establish today. How do we build the area of the foundation? And the third is the height of the foundation itself. Now, the height of the foundation, what we will do for this class, I'm going to give you guys some basic kind of thumb rule or a basic consideration, but the actual height of the foundation is a matter of much more structural kind of detailing, okay, which you will be sort of doing in your seventh semester, I think, when you do structural analysis of members as well. Okay, so let's proceed. Okay, few considerations before we go. Okay, suppose if the depth of the foundation is 600 mm or less. Okay, this is an example. What will happen is that your soil, which is outside your building, is going to be subject to different kind of weather forces. Okay, and it is also then going to be subject to all kinds of movements, cracks, and things like that. Okay, whereas the soil which is right beneath your building is actually not going to be exposed to weather the same way. Okay, this difference can cause the soil to show some kind of movement and settlement, which can actually affect the foundation. As you can see in this diagram, I'll just point out to you. As you can see in the diagram, okay, it's this outside soil which is actually going to be affected with weather, water collection, and things like that, and is going to show movement, obviously, and that's going to tilt the foundation, and you will start cracks appearing in your structure. Okay, that's one. If your foundations are kept at a depth which is 1 meter or below, generally those settlements are not observed. Generally, those settlements are not observed. Okay, this is to remember. A foundation which is kept at a depth of 600 mm or less you're going to find settlements due to weathering. Foundations which are kept below 1 meter, generally you are not going to get those kind of settlements happening. Yeah? Okay, so for our example today, we are going to try and establish the size of the foundation for this structure that I have sketched over here. Okay, very simple. It's a 9 meter by 9 meter kind of a slab. There are beams, there is a column, there are plinth beams, and then there is a column that continues below. Okay, I have not yet drawn the foundation for this. We are going to calculate it. Okay. What we are going to try and find is what is the total exerted mass on ground and what is the bearing capacity of soil. Okay, let us think about the foundation again a little bit. What is happening in the foundation? Okay, so the load which is coming down from the column is distributed across the entire foundation. Okay, and that needs to be sort of countered by the bearing capacity or the bearing load that is coming from the soil itself. Okay, but as the foundation itself, what is happening to the foundation itself is that this bearing force that is coming from the soil tends to move the foundation upwards. It actually bends the foundation. Reason why in the foundations the main reinforcements are towards the bottom, which is what takes the tension. Yeah, and the upper part of your foundation actually is in compression. Okay, as a basic kind of a minimum, concrete foundation should be of a depth 6 inch plus 3 inches plus your reinforcements in between. Okay, unlike cover, which in other RCC elements is generally not 3 inches, in case of the foundations the cover has to be at least 3 inches because foundations are continually exposed to moisture. Okay, and you require sufficient cover in order to prevent any moisture related ingresses into your foundation, and that might actually affect your reinforcements also. Yeah. Okay. Another very important factor in case of the way soil behaves vis-a-vis foundations is what is called this is the actual cone of force which is exerted by the foundation. Okay. Look here, inside the RCC elements. Okay, the line of shear is at 45 degrees. Okay, but outside the RCC elements in the soil, the line of shear actually it moves at around about 60 degrees. Okay, what happens is that as you move down equal to the width of the foundation, okay, the soil pressure gets cut by half, meaning the load which is coming down is going to also get cut by half. Okay, as you move further below by same distance, which is the width of the foundation, 2 times the width of foundation, that force or that pressure gets cut by 2/3. Okay, what does this mean? It means that your maximum soil bearing force is required where the foundation touches the ground. Okay, and this is called the critical zone of compaction. Yeah, this is very important because this is the reason why. I'll read out. Because the load spreads out, the pressure on the soil is greatest right beneath the footing. And by the time we get down below the footing, a distance equal to the footing width, the unit soil pressure has dropped to about half. Okay, this area which I'm calling the critical zone of compaction is the reason why many before you also put your foundation on the ground, you also strengthen that part. So you will generally do a rubble work. Okay, or you will also put your rubble work, sand and PCC. Okay, in order to strengthen the critical zone of compaction. Okay, how do you strengthen that? There are 2 components to that. One is creating a thick layer of hardcore material, which should be inert and not affected by water. Suitable materials are gravel, crushed rock, quarry waste, concrete rubble, tile or brick rubble, blast furnace slag, pulverized fuel ash. Okay, these are hardcore materials which should be laid evenly and they should be well compacted. Okay, with the upper surface, which is this particular surface, uh, actually blinded with fine aggregate like sand or something like that. Yeah, it's not shown in the drawing, but generally the upper surface here is laid with sand because that levels out the surface when you are putting a PCC bed. This is what is a PCC bed. Yeah. For domestic works is the thickness is different, meaning if you're doing in your plinth it will be different. The thickness when you're putting it at the foundations is a little different. Okay. This happens at the base of the foundation. Yeah, this also happens in the plinth, but this also is important at the base of the foundation. Okay, I'm going to skip that because I think that's not very relevant. Although soil itself is very diverse. Okay, and generally you will have to take cognizance of the fact of where you are building. Okay, this is just a very broad map of soil in India, but it's important to know that if you're building somewhere in say Konkan area, chances are that you're going to get a lot of laterite soil. Okay, it means that the properties of soil and the kind of foundations required are different as against when you are building in alluvial soils as in the Gangetic plains. Yeah. Soil itself is made of three components: clay, silt, and sand. Okay. In Mumbai, the predominant soil cover is sandy. Okay. Whereas in suburban districts, the soil cover is alluvial and loamy. Okay. Let's remember this. A loamy soil is best suited for any building foundations generally. Okay. It has even balanced properties, especially how it maintains water. Okay. This is for. Sorry.
Can you please go a little slower? Yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Fleur, did you follow it till now?
Yeah. But in Mumbai, what is it? Sandy, right?
Yeah. In Mumbai, generally the soil is sandy, whereas in the suburban districts, the soil is alluvial and loamy. Huh? Okay. The soil is much more loamy. You can generally, when the foundations are made, before the foundations are made, as Mamta was showing in the last presentation, you actually dig a pit. Okay, and you take a cross section of that soil and you send it for soil testing. Okay, the soil testing has to be done at multiple levels in order to establish which is the right level for you to place the foundations. Okay, because you want to find out what soil or what level we get soil which has the right bearing capacity for us. Okay, it's coming further. Am I okay? Is this fine? Is this okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, furthermore, so we were looking at the what is soil made up of, but furthermore, soil is also categorized as rocky soil, which is made with igneous rocks, limestones, hard stones, slate, shales, soft sandstones, chalk, etc., etc. Okay, and also heavily shattered rocks. So one set is rocky soil. Yeah. And when it comes to rocky soil, okay, what you have is sorry guys, just a second. Can you guys please go? Please go. Please. Yeah, sorry. Sorry?
I think we should invite them to class.
We should what? Invite them, please.
Yeah.
I will not be able to do anything. Okay, sorry. So when it comes to rocky soil, okay, what I have put over here is a very sort of simple bearing capacity of soil. In case of rocky soils, there are 4 different categories of soils. In each of them, it indicates a safe bearing capacity, and in each of them, it also indicates the minimum depth of foundation, okay, and the kind of foundations that this soil can take with this depth. Okay, please don't for these are more like what do you say? These are more like thumb kind of figures. Okay, for us. Anytime that you have to go in for foundation, you have to do a detailed soil analysis. That's a given. Okay, you can't escape that. Okay, you have to have a detailed soil analysis, and the structural engineer will actually then recommend based on that at what depth we should actually put the foundations. But this right now is for us as references for us to sort of start thinking about how things are done. They are also calculated with some science and not just like that. But not necessarily that if I dig at a rocky soil over here, I'll get that same bearing capacity. No. Yeah. The other type is what is called cohesive soil. Okay, so you have rocky soil, you have cohesive soil. So cohesive soil is actually clay soil. Okay, particles of which stick together. Okay, but it is subject to more shrinkage and cracking in hot and dry weather. So it has expansion and wet weathering. Generally, deeper foundations are suggested in such cohesive and clay soils. Yeah, is everybody with me till now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What we have over here is another 5 types of cohesive soils. Their safe bearing capacities, the minimum depth of foundations that need to be accounted for, and the kinds of foundations that each soil type can actually take at that particular depth. Okay, please remember that you might have a soil which has lesser bearing capacity. Okay, you can actually increase the area of your footing. Okay, that might also work. It has its own limitations. I can't increase the area of my footing beyond my plot size, right? So similarly, like that, there are many ways in which you can actually work out your foundations and footings. If there are any questions, Mamta, you will have to interject. Huh?
Yeah, so if you go back to the previous slide, because Shravan has a question if the first one is similar to bedrock, then the
Which
one
one?
before, yeah, this one, rock without lamination and defects, granite and whatever. Is that it, Shravan? Is that your question?
Shravan, a bedrock is a much more consolidated sort of rock. Okay, this is still a part of soil. Okay, so you understand this can be mixed with several things. So look at the types. Okay, you can get they are not consolidated in that sense. They are more shattered, broken, soft rocks. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? Sorry, Shravan.
Yeah, so bedrock is more like a monolith kind of a structure.
Bedrock is much more consolidated.
Yes, and that is where we probably would, quarry to get the rock out, the bed of the thing.
Yeah. So that,
Yeah.
but soil itself can be rocky. Okay.
Yes.
Soil itself can also be rocky. Yeah. Okay. The third type.
Sorry, Shirish.
Yeah, go ahead.
We just term it as hard strata. Okay.
Yeah.
So the foundation is taken down up to what we call as hard strata.
Hard strata.
Yeah.
The third type is what is. The third type is what is called non-cohesive soil. Okay, the strength of this soil depends upon the grading, meaning the grades of aggregates that are there, the packing and average size of particles. Okay, in general, better the grading and tighter the packing and larger the grain, the higher is the capacity for load carrying in such soils. Okay, I'm showing you what are the types of those sort of non-cohesive soils. So you can have like gravel sand, gravel compaction. You can have coarse compact dry sand. You can have fine sand and silt. You can have loose gravel, sand gravel mixtures. You can have a fine sand. So these are all the various sort of non-cohesive soil types with their bearing capacities. Now compare the bearing capacities here. Okay, the safe bearing capacities here with your rock, with the kind of rocky soil. Do you see the safe bearing capacity of rocky soils is 3000 kilonewton per meter, 1600 kilonewton per meter. Okay, only the soft rock is 440 kilonewton per meter. Okay, if you look at cohesive soil, the soil bearing capacities are much lesser. Okay, non-cohesive soil, the soil bearing capacities are in between the two. Yeah.
Also, like Shirish explained about the sort of force reducing as you go lower into the thing. If you remember your school formula, You remember your school formula of the relation between force and pressure in area, right? So that's basically what it is. The minute that you increase that area, that surface area of your footing, I mean, that means that's going to reduce the pressure, right? Or the force on it.
Yeah.
I don't remember the
What
formula.
is,
I guess
yeah,
you
yeah.
remember. You guys
No, no.
remember
I
the
mean,
formula.
also what is important very often, you know that there is a metro being constructed under our buildings, right? Yeah. Hello.
Yes, yes.
Has anybody experienced
An
this?
underground
No?
metro.
Sorry.
An underground metro.
Yeah, yeah. So near where I'm staying in Mahim, there is an underground metro being
Oh.
constructed. Okay. How is it that the metro is able to go below the sort of buildings? This is how it is able to go, because after a certain depth of the building, okay, generally the forces are evenly spread. Okay, of course, in this case, the metro is using the street primarily as its kind of sort of underground channel. Okay, but in some places the metro is going directly under kind of constructions as well. Okay, where we okay. So the three types of soils, and you get a see. We as architects have to develop a kind of instinctive and intuitive understanding of soil and what are its properties. Okay, I should be able to look at soil and say that this is a rocky soil. Okay, and things like that. Now let's look at foundations just for some time. Okay, there are fundamentally in case of reinforced kind of constructions, two types of broad foundations. One is what are called shallow foundations that are employed when stable soil of adequate bearing capacity occurs relatively near to the ground surface. They are placed directly below the lowest part of substructure and transfer building loads directly to supporting soil by vertical pressure. Okay, the entire foundation depends on the vertical pressure which is exerted. Okay, then there are what are called deep foundations, which are employed when soil underlying a foundation is unstable or of inadequate bearing capacity. They extend down through the unsuitable soil to transfer building loads to more appropriate bearing stratum of rock or dense sand and gravel well below the superstructure. Do you understand? This foundation, a deep foundation, will go below the soil which has inadequate bearing capacity and reach the soil which has suitable bearing capacity. Okay, and it will go all the way down there, and then it will settle the foundation. At the same time, deeper foundations don't only rely on the vertical kind of a pressure, they also rely on the pressure that is applied laterally, meaning all of this meaning all of the surface contact comes in play in order to keep the foundation stable. In case of shallow foundation, it is primarily this part which comes into play, unless if you are doing like if the entire basement is going to be treated as a foundation, then you will have this contact also coming into play. Yeah. Okay, so furthermore, shallow foundations will have spread footings, strip footings. I'll show you these. Okay, combined footings. Okay, please, I'm keeping this slide over here. When you see the slide presentation, there are specific comments with each kind of footing. Okay, that will help you understand what are the specificities of each of these footings. In case of deep foundations, you have driven piles, piers, caissons, mat or raft foundations, floating foundations, and things like that. So let's see some of the shallow foundations. Okay, for some reason, just only give control to people you trust. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. Sorry. The first one, okay, which is a very a standard and a common one, which is isolated footings. Okay, these are individual spread footings and they support freestanding piers. Yeah, Then you have something called strip footings, which are continuous spread footings of foundation walls. Okay. The third is a continuous footing, reinforced concrete footing extended to support a row of columns. So you can also have a continuous footing that supports a row of columns, as you can see. Okay. Remember, all these things are subject to the load and the bearing capacity. Okay, and what area is required for the footing. In case of the shallow foundations, that is very important. Also remember that you might think I want to doing a deep foundation for buildings is actually a very expensive affair. Yeah, generally it is done only for buildings that are high rises. Okay, the third is what is called a grade beam. Okay, this is the grade beam, which is reinforced concrete beam supporting a bearing wall, near ground level and transferring the load to isolated footing piers. Okay, here is an example of a cantilever or strap footing, which consists of a column footing connected by a tie beam, to another footing. This is another footing over here. Yeah, yeah. In order to balance the asymmetrically imposed load. Okay. Here's another combined footing, which is reinforced concrete footing of a perimeter foundation wall. This is a perimeter foundation wall. Okay. Extended to support the interior column again. So generally cantilever and combined footings are used when foundations abut a property line and is not possible to construct a symmetrical loading footing. Okay, if I have somebody else's property and I want to put a column next to it, I might not be able to build a symmetrical footing. Okay, in such cases where I use a cantilever or a strap footing. Okay, the other type is what is called a mat or a raft foundation, which actually is a thick, heavily reinforced slab like this that serves as a single monolithic footing for a number of columns, and all the columns actually take off from this. Yeah. Mat foundations are used when allowable bearing capacity of foundation soil is low relative to the loads, and interior column footings become so large that it becomes more economical to merge them into a single slab. Suppose I have many columns, okay, and suppose the sort of spread area requirement of each column becomes so large that they actually start to intersect. Might as well do a raft. Yeah, that takes care of everything. Mat foundations may be stiffened by using ribs, beams, or walls. Like I can actually stiffen them by actually building walls in between, RCC walls in between. I can stiffen the entire sort of mat, okay, like this. You see this? Yeah. Okay, Mamta, anything you want to add here?
So they're coming up with questions simultaneously, so
Go ahead,
we can
please.
take a look at it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sure. Go ahead.
Ruheen says if the soil bearing capacity is so low that you reach water level. These are two different things, okay? Soil bearing capacity can be very low without water, and you can also reach the groundwater table without your soil bearing capacity being very low. So one thing is when your soil bearing capacity is very low, you have to go deep down. So then you'll probably choose something like a pile foundation or something similar to that. And if you reach water or you're in water, then there are special kinds of concrete that you will use. I think they're called as hygroconcrete. These are concrete which can set even within water. So there are special ways in which that construction takes place. If you look at the pillars or the columns of your bridges, right, which go over water, right, even those have been, I mean, even that concrete has been poured and the concretization has taken place. So there's special methods in which you carry out that kind of concretization.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Then
Anyone else?
there's some other question. Yeah. How tall can a structure be for the basement to act as a foundation? For the basement to act as a foundation, your structure really can't be very tall. Okay. So like what Shirish has shown here, the raft foundation, you're probably going for a raft kind of foundation where you have a basement, but there your building may not be very tall. If you're looking at if you look at these buildings in Parel, right, Shirish? where
Yeah.
you have huge podiums of parking, which is 6-7 floors of parking, and then the actual sort of residential portion or the other commercial portion begins after that height, then you really can't have the basement as a foundation.
See, look at this slide. Okay, see where the pointer is. Okay, I'll read out. A floating foundation is used in yielding soil, has for its footing a mat placed deep enough that the weight of excavated soil is equal or greater than the weight of construction being supported. Okay, so I have removed a certain mass of soil. Okay, I can only put in I can only put in that much amount of mass to support it. You understand? Who was asking this question?
Yeah.
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 So you understood that. So whatever I am removing from here, okay, I can only go up to that much mass. Okay. If I have to go taller and the mass increases, then I need to find another foundation system. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
So, like in general, it would it be around like a small bungalow if the soil is really good, then maybe a 3-4 story apartment building. That's the max you can go, or even less.
No, it depends. It depends entirely on the quality of soil. Okay.
Right.
Okay. It depends on the quality. It depends on the compaction, and that is why the soil test becomes a very important step. Yeah. Before you plan your foundations in any way. Okay. Yeah. But important factor is that if I have to create this kind of what is the principle? Again, you have to imagine that this entire structure is going to float. Okay, imagine that how Mamta was saying, the boy, okay, it is going to float. How does that float? If this exerts more force than what is forcing back, it is going to sink. Okay, the same principle is applied over here also. Yeah? Okay. Anyone else, Mamta?
I have a question related to basement only. So, is it necessary for basement to be combined with the foundation, or
No, no, it is not. It is
okay?
not.
Um,
Okay, not at all.
okay.
Yeah, so basement and foundations are two different things.
Yeah.
If you want to use a raft foundation or a mat foundation that Shirish has shown here, that possibly could be for a basement of a low-rise structure, but it's not necessarily so. Okay, and then you have these beams that are tied up together. Like Vaishnavi is asking, what do you do in case of earthquakes? What are you trying to do in case your building experiences an earthquake? You're trying to counter those vibrations, right?
Lateral forces.
Correct.
The
Those
lateral forces
right.
have to be taken care of. Yeah.
Which is why you've introduced these tie beams. They tie that entire frame together. Like we saw in Chakrata, that was done with the help of timber. The whole building was sort of tied or packed together so that it doesn't vibrate. Okay.
In case of RCC construction, that lateral force bearing is actually introduced in your entire system through reinforcements. Yeah, naturally, right? Otherwise, how are you going to? There are other ways in which that lateral force is also sometimes what do you say, compensated for. One of the ways is by creating, so expansion joints is one way in which you do it. If a building a structure is longer, then you introduce an expansion joint such that the building gets the play, in case of lateral movement and things like that. Anyone else? Are we in sync till now? Shall we move ahead?
Yeah, looks like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, what I have done here for you guys is I have tried to do a very simple calculation of. I'll run through this with you. Okay. So if you see earlier, this is a 9 meter by 9 meter slab. Okay. The column size is 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters. Okay. There's a plinth beam which is 50 centimeters by 30 centimeters area cross section. There is a beam which is also 50 centimeters by 30 centimeters. Okay. What are we trying to calculate? What is the total exerted mass on ground by this structure, and what is the bearing capacity of soil? Okay. So let's first calculate the total exerted mass. You have a column which is 30 by 30 by height of the column from the level of the plinth to the next floor over here is 3 meters. Okay, so 300, and there are 4 such columns. Generally, this is the density of concrete RCC is 2,500 kg per meter cube. Okay, so that means that the columns by themselves are exerting a load of 2,700 kilograms coming down. Yeah. Then there is a substructure column, which is below the level of ground and going inside. Okay, this column I have considered is 1.5 meters. Okay, the load exerted by that column itself is 1,350. Then there are beams. We have 4 beams over here on the 4 sides that exerts a weight of 12,600 kilograms. There are plinth beams which also exert the same weight, and then there is the slab. Please remember, the slab is the heaviest component in an RCC construction. If you were in a load-bearing construction, okay, generally the slab would not be as heavy. It would actually be the walls which are the heaviest. Yeah, this is something which you should which should be set. It should come inside you very quickly. Yeah, in load-bearing construction, the wall takes on the maximum sort of structural kind of sort of strength, and that comes by the load or the mass of the wall itself. Okay, and that is the reason why in a load-bearing construction, if you're building a wall on the lower floor, the wall will be heavier and it will get a little lighter as you go up, and it will get a little lighter as you go up further. Okay, in case of load-bearing construction, if the floor is made with joists and timber elements, it is much lighter. Okay. In case of RCC, it is exactly the opposite. The slab will be always the heaviest. Yeah. So the total dead load which is exerted is around 55,370 kilos, or I have converted it to kilonewton. Kilonewton conversion is, I think, Mamta, how much is it? Something like 9.8 or something like that.
I have to check.
Yeah, 9.8, something like that it is. Okay. Then the next question is, what about live loads which are imposed? As a thumb rule, live loads can be around 1.5 kilonewton per meter square. Okay, which means in our case, we'll have a live load of around about 105 kilonewtons. Okay, what does that mean? The total area of footing is the total weight divided by the bearing capacity. I have considered a bearing capacity of a loose gravel sand gravel mixture, okay, which is around 245 kilonewton per meter square, and I have put the depth of foundation at 1.5 meters. Yeah, what it gives me is the total area of the footing, which is again total load which is imposed divided by bearing capacity. Very simple. It gives me 2.6 meters square. And the area of each footing, I've divided that into 4, will be 0.6 meters square. Area of each footing, and the size of the footing will be 0.8 meter by 0.8 meter. That is the size of the footing. Okay, I have not yet discussed the actual depth of the footing. As I said earlier, the depth of the footing requires a little bit more understanding of structural properties of concrete. But as a thumb rule, I'm going to in this case build a footing which is, say, about 6 inches plus 3 inches plus another 2 inches for the reinforcement. So say about a foot. Okay. Next. To this, now I have added, assume that each of these are infilled with brick walls. Okay. Sorry. Pointer doesn't disappear, is it? I can't read what I've written. Okay, so I've put a 2 brick wall. It's an external wall, or 200 centimeter thick, plus its mortar. Okay, generally a brick wall is around about, this is a ballpark figure, right? 1922. It depends on the density of brick. Each brick will be made differently. A standard sort of brick density is between 1800 and 2200 kilogram per meter cube. Okay, mortar itself is another 500 kg per meter cube. So based on that, I calculated, I got a total load of the walls as 46,793 kgs. I added the two of them. I added the total exerted load to the already established load that we had of the RCC structure, and I get a total area of footing that is required, which gives us a footing size of 1.5 meter, 1.1 meter by 1.1 meter. You can perform a similar exercise. You can add one more floor to this, and you will see that the size of the footing increases. Yeah, Mamta, there are questions.
Yeah, I'm answering them.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I have shown you one of the ways in which you can actually start to calculate the total loads. Okay. In case of RCC construction, it is relatively easier. If you look at the textbooks that we have put, there are several densities of several elements that are already given for you guys. In the other textbook, he has done a different way of calculating the overall load of the structure. What he has done is he has calculated the load of only 1 meter. You see this? Only 1 meter. Only 1 meter he has calculated the load. Okay, and then he has multiplied that with the total perimeter or length of the entire plan. Okay, that's how the load has been calculated. In this case, the load is calculated as per each element. Yeah, that's the only difference. Fundamentally, your area of the footing is total load divided by the bearing capacity. Yeah, how you achieve that area of footing is in the different types of foundations that you will build. It will depend on how deep the foundations have to go and what all is required in terms of what all is available in terms of your plot size and things like that. Here's a very simple diagram cutting through the foundation of one of these structures. You can right now it is showing brick over here, but it can also be a concrete column. Okay, and with brick infill, of course. What you have is you have a kind of a hard strata at the base. Okay, on which you will do rubble soling, you will compact it, yeah, on which you will put a PCC bed, on which you will have the foundation. Generally, between the hard strata and PCC bed, you also put a layer of sand. Sand actually, what it does is it sort of creates an even level. Okay, that is also done. We are going to, I'll discuss the plinth beam and the foundation and the plinth in detail together. Yeah. There are also elements called ground beams which are put in case the foundation goes much deeper and the entire column has to be extended. You also introduce something called a ground beam, which keeps the column from bending actually. Okay, I have Mamta. You had shown this photograph last time, na?
Yes,
I think.
yes.
Yeah. So again, just to sort of recap, here is a situation. You can see. Look at this. Look at this side condition. Actually,
Oh,
the side.
sorry, Shirish. Sorry. Can you go back to your sketch?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing very important, please observe in the sketch is observe the way that Shirish has indicated rubble soling. If I find any one of you indicating rubble soling in a different way than this has been shown, you're going to get thrashed by me because I've seen horrible kind of indications for rubble soling when you go to the third year. It's really pathetic. Please note this very carefully. After the presentation is put up, I hope you will resketch this in your sketchbooks. Please draw this sketch. It is very essential to note that the pointed part is on the lower side because these are rammed into the earth.
Yeah.
So you would want to push those stones in that fashion. Okay.
Yeah.
And also look at the way that he's indicated rammed earth. That's the right way of showing it. And you really cannot go wrong in this. Okay. This is very important for all your higher years also. So I just thought it's essential to say this. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. All right, yeah, no, it's okay. We are going to discuss this part, which is the plinth and the construction of plinth in detail, and understand the relationship of the ground and the plinth together. Okay, we'll do that as a separate lecture. Okay, so here we have a plinth beam, as you can see. Okay, which is connected to a column. Yeah, the column footing is a spread footing. You can see over here a PCC kind of a bed. What I want to show you also in the site is that look at the excavated ground. Okay, is very loose. Okay, that is why when the soil is put back, even at that point of time, soil is compacted. Okay, because what has happened in the process of excavation is you have taken well compacted soil and you have made it loose. Okay, so when the soil is put back, it has to be compacted back in. Yeah, this is what your soling looks like. Okay, I'll show you a better photograph. I think I have it. Yeah, this is also way it can appear. It is very important what Mamta is saying, that it is driven inside. It has to, the pointed edge has to be below, so that when you drive it inside, it forces the compaction. Okay, and then here is an image of what the RCC footing cage will look like. If you notice, the main bars in a foundation are actually on the lower side, because that is the side which has to brace for counter kind of forces coming from the soil, exerted from the column. Yeah. I'm just showing you a site photograph where many trapezoidal column footings have been constructed. Some of them have actually, they have also built some of them as continuous footing from which the trapezoid emerges. In this case, you can see that the PCC is actually made across the entire foundation. Okay, reason being that the foundations are coming so close to one another. Yeah, so it doesn't make sense for me to separately make the PCC. I'm laying a single PCC layer across the entire foundation on top of some sand. So before this, they would have done compaction. Yeah. You can
Yeah, so
also
this is
see
a very
actually
essential
very
point.
interesting, because see, Mamta, how deep it is going. You know, the
Correct.
excavation
Yeah.
from the upper
Yeah.
level has gone much deeper inside in this
Correct.
case.
So
And
it's
they are
very
also doing a basement. They are also doing a basement here.
essential to note what Shirish said, because you need people to be working between the foundations, and when you
Yeah.
see that that gap is very small, then you would want to do that combined PCC bed. Okay, that's for convenience. Yeah.
Okay, I think that is it. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm open for questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So when we are doing the thing for like today, like the building for our building, we probably do that thumb rule thing where we take the columns and we take the width of the column. I mean the
Yes.
dimensions and stuff. All right.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. But how tall is your building floor?
6 floors.
How much?
Six floors.
6 floors. Okay. If you look at the textbooks that we have uploaded, there are some thumb rules at calculating the kind of loads that a 6-story concrete building can exert. Huh?
All
There are
right, I'll
some
check.
thumb rules there also. Yeah. So you can use those thumb rules very well, because what that will do is that it will. So you already know the columns, right, in your house. You already know the columns.
Yeah.
Okay. You know the sizes of those columns. Okay.
Yeah.
Using that thumb rule and assuming the condition of soil, you can actually get the area of footing. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and that way you can actually suggest the in plan at least the square of the footing. Okay, and you can use some of the keys that we have given here to decide the thickness or the height of the footing.
Okay.
It might that the inaccuracies are going to be in the actual sort of design of this element right now.
Yeah.
Okay, that is where the inaccuracies are. We'll be aware of that.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, just hold on. Okay, Ira, what do you not understand? What do you not understand? Please, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Sorry, my mic just. Yeah, if my building has a very spread out plan, then how much would that affect its column, the foundation pier depth? Because it's got like a kind of a very like large size in terms of plan for how tall it is.
Doesn't matter, Shravan. You already know the columns in your building now, correct?
Yeah.
You already know the beams also. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can very well calculate the the slab. Slab is already known. You know where the slabs are.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. You know, yeah, you know the thickness of the slab also. Correct. So all you have to do is all that is actually now not known to you is the exact sort of wall thicknesses everywhere. Okay, and the opening sizes. Okay, so you can very well actually calculate the mass of your whole building. Yeah, within range, of course. There will be elements that you might not be able to calculate. Okay.
I mean,
But
there's
you
a
can-
whole third of the building which I wasn't able to get more than the outline because there's construction. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that, but that third of the building which you don't, which you're not able to document, for the sake of this study, you can assume it as the same as yours. You can do that also, or you do the foundation only to your part of your building.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.